Everyone is aware of Lindsey Graham's construction, a standing as among the most well-known Republican senators in the United States. In spite of his changing partnerships, Graham has maintained pertinent and significant thanks to his loud and frequently contentious personality. But what doesn't receive enough the real reality about attention is the personal life of Graham and his partners. However, before we discuss all of that, let's perform a brief background investigation on the South. Will the senator from Carolina be born in July, September 9, 1955, in the segregated South? The life of Carolina Lindsey Graham was modest and difficult upbringing. He lived with Millie, his parents, and Graham, Florence James, and his sister in the hygienic back room of their bar cafe that served as a restaurant as well. He had to share a bathroom as a result with customers who were employees at a local mill plant. The family eventually relocated to a trailer, then to a house close by. Graham was only 12 years old at the time. Started working at the pool downstairs, racked tables in the hall to assist with his family's financial difficulties, and being employed at the bar at such a young age made Graham mature rapidly because the obligations that he had as the initial child, but it also revealed exposing him to dangerous situations too soon. In one of his responsibilities in life was to take calls from worried wives who are trying to for their inebriated husbands. In addition to these, young Graham's responsibilities also observed the hard facts of separation. Black people were not permitted in the pub. Individuals to consume beer there. In spite of 5% of Central's people are this bigotry against African Americans made a deep influence on him throughout his high school formative years. Graham wasn't a perfect student. He was actually a C student, but despite it, he continued to have huge dreams. He once expressed to his teacher his desire to become one day. The governor made a pronouncement saying his classmates chuckle after he completing high school at Daniel and obtaining only 800 out of 1,600 points on his test. Many may have believed that college was over. He was out of reach, but Graham was convinced that he was accepted to the South Carolina University, is making his family's history as the first to eventually enroll in college. But Graham was a pupil at the university where he was a pressing request to return home. When he got there, he discovered his mother in awful illness, fighting an advanced stage of. They hurried her to the hospital for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Sadly, she didn't make it to the hospital. Shortly later, Graham was given another devastating phone call to his 13-year-old. Their father was discovered deceased by their sister in his slumber following a severe heart attack. Having lost both parents, Graham took on the obligation to be his sister's legal guardian, to remain in the vicinity, and because of the service, he was able to pursue his education at the University of Columbia, IIA, South Carolina. Following completing their studies at the University of South, Graham of the Carolina School of Law immediately entered active duty in 1982 by enlisting in the U.S. Air Force as a lawyer in the Judge Advocate. He began as an airman in the General's Corps. After that, the force defense lawyer moved to the main Rhin Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. Between 1984 and 1988, held the position of Chief of Air Force Prosecutor throughout Europe. At this period, he was highlighted in a 60-minute segment while protecting a pilot in the Air Force charged with marijuana use, which revealed the botched drug testing in the Air Force protocols. Following his stay in Europe after his return to South Carolina, Graham retired from active duty in 1989 and started practicing law in private practice. He was the county attorney's assistant from 1988 to 1992 for Oconee County and as Central's city attorney starting in 1992. Graham left the Air Force in 1994, became a member of the South Carolina Air National 1989, and remained there until 1995 prior to joining the U.S. Air Force Reserve during the Gulf War 1990-1991, but he was called back to active duty responsibility at McIntyre Air as a judge advocate Eastover South National Guard Station, Carolina, where he gave a final briefing. Graham, pilots on the laws of war, 1998, was elevated to the rank of lieutenant colonel, and by 2004, he received a second promotion to U.S. Air Force Reserve Colonel with both the White House ceremony and conducted by the President himself. Graham received George Bush in the same year himself into a small legal battle. At first, the lower court determined that it's okay for Graham to join the military judge while seated. However, in 2006, the court calls for the military to intervene and declared otherwise, concluding that it is inappropriate for him to play both roles. At the same time, Graham completed 2 brief periods in Iraq as a first on active duty in April, the reservist, then for 2 weeks in August. After that, concentrating on the rule of law and detainees problems, but he continued after the August 2009 Senate recess, he traveling to Afghanistan to provide further service even though he was subsequently designated as a senior teacher at the Judge Advocate. He never really enrolled in general school. That position in 2014, Graham received for his exceptional service. He received a Bronze Star. As the heir's top legal advisor, the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq are from he was there from August 2009 to July 2014. Is charge of managing the detention of military detainees following more than 33. Graham retired after many years of service from the 2015 as a colonel in the Air Force following having attained the required retirement age 60 years old for his rank during his tenure as a senator and congressman. He did not receive a military salary since he was not qualified to get one while serving in the federal government, but Graham was advancing through the Air Force's ranks. He was also taking significant actions in his political career that began. In 1994, Graham witnessed a golden chance to fulfill his childhood ambition of achieving political triumph was not a reality. The governorship he once envisioned, however, that was a significant positive step. Direction in the long-term. Congressman Butler Derrick, a Democrat, opted to retire after 20 years, standing in for South Carolina's 3rd identifying his congressional district. Graham gave it his best shot using a combination of Graham's drive and a little bit of luck, fought valiantly, and won the voters' attention to his military background in addition to his flaming determination, attracted the interest of many individuals, getting a boost from the T.M. Thurman. A Republican senator from the US entered the competition to replace Derrick. The Republican primary was won by Graham with 52% of votes, surpassing Bob Cantrell's obtained 33%, and Ed, who received Graham, received 15% in the general election. Against a state senator who is Democratic, James Brand JRB, won by a landslide, supported Graham, who received 60% of the vote. In contrast to Bryan's 40% of this victory was a component of the bigger that year's Republican Revolution made the first Republican to represent the district because Graham faced off against 1877 in 1996. Debbie Dorn, who was raised in a strong. Her political relatives included her as a niece, Derrick the butler, and William's daughter Bryan Dorn, a longtime Jennings player. Despite the difficulty, Congressman Graham successfully won re-election with a strong 60% of the vote, giving Dorn 40% in 1998. 2 years later, Graham didn't even had to work hard for his third. He ran without any opposition and cruised to by the year 2000. Graham had returned to the competing in the political arena against George Bry, a Democrat, is leading the campaign. Was difficult. But Graham's appeal remained firm, giving him a persuasive 4th term, holding an overwhelming 68% of the Breed Harp lagged with 30% of the vote. When the illustrious Senator Thurman ultimately made the decision to retire, Lindsey Graham was aware that this was his chance to sprint it over to fill Thurman's chair and naturally sailed through the Republican primary uncontested, but the actual conflict arose against Alex in the general election. Sanders, the previous head of the former Chief Judge and College of Charleston of the Court of Appeals in South Carolina. Although Sanders' resume was impressive, Graham's election day saw a fierce campaign. Graham achieved a resounding triumph with Sanders received 6,010 votes. He received 54% of the vote, or 48,735. In contrast to Sanders' 44%, this victory wasn't merely a Graham's political victory was unprecedented. Became the first new state in South Carolina senator since Fritz's arrival. Graham campaigned for a 2nd term in 1966. Things became interesting in 2008. He had to deal with one of Buddy's main challenges, the national executive, Witherspoon, the South Carolina committeeman Republican Party, but surprisingly, he ended up winning big for most people, snagging 186,187,547, or 66.8%. In contrast to Graham essentially swept the 33.118% state, winning every South state except one, the 46 counties of Carolina. The General Graham went on to discuss the election versus pilot Bob Conley and engineer who had succeeded in obtaining the Conley's Democratic nomination in spite of remarkable history of Graham's campaign. Was a formidable force following his campaign spent an astounding $6.6 million. Graham's victory was less than Conley's 15,000, firmly with 134 votes out of 765 for Conley's 790,621, which gives him 57.5% on election day. Graham has had an extremely simple life until 2014. Run in order to win elections. But in that year, he was regarded as one among the most susceptible Republican senators seeking re-election after his poor evaluations of approval and reputation for cooperating and making concessions to he was the main target of a Democratic conservative activists' main obstacle. The Tea Party movimentos were among them. Chris Choka is ready to dethrone him. The Club for Growth's president even suggested that his company would support a main rival if a powerful. Despite these dangers, a candidate emerged. No significant challenger appeared, and it was generally believed that Graham would prevail. This was primarily because to his abilities in coordinating a forceful reaction to possible difficulties. Graham made friends with potential adversaries from the states, their assistance from a congressional delegation having a good time raising and protecting their preferred committee assignments. He additionally assembled a powerful political. The Graham Machine is an operation comprising 6 regional offices throughout the state and a system of thousands of salaried employees and more than 5,000 volunteers from the precinct. Captain Graham accumulated an incredible covered the South and the campaign were West Carolina with uplifting advertisements. He concentrated on local issues and constituency services, which increased his attractiveness. Instead of caving into the Tea Party, Graham confronted the supporters, asserting outright that the Republican more inclusivity was required in the party. As the Republican primary came close to all of his at last, the labor started to pay off and concurrently, his scores of approval greatly enhanced, and when the election came around, he won with there were 1,780 votes, which entirely absorbed his closest friend's votes. Lee Bry, a challenger state senator, who obtained a mere 48,900 votes or 15.4%, notwithstanding Graham's controversy, kept up his Senate campaign for the full term. And he started playing with the intention of seeking the presidency. After less than a year, he made the decision to intensify his dream from childhood and enter the 2016 presidential election ring. It wasn't as simple for him this time. Just as he had in the Senate in a crowded field of elections, Lindsey, a Republican contender, was so low in the polls that you required it to find his numbers. He used a magnifying glass. Was confronted by powerful individuals such as, unfortunately, Donald Trump's. The campaign was a complete failure before it started, but that didn't prevent him from launching attacks on Trump each time he had the opportunity to do one that he couldn't tolerate. Trump's brazen demeanor and behavior. The rhetoric of shoot from the hip was far from scream from the more conventionally polished method that Graham was accustomed to receiving his point across. He frequently employed comedy and sarcasm to emphasize what he perceived as the ridiculousness of Trump's proposed policies. He didn't mince words, though, at other occasions, referring to Trump as a religious jerk, bigoted, even telling him to burn in hell. Trump, of course, always had his as a kind of retaliation. He even read out Graham's number in a press conference. Soon later, Graham took a look around, decided after noticing the writing on the wall to disconnect the plug and exit the run for president on December 21. Interestingly, in 2015, following Trump's Graham's song during the president did a total U-turn in March of 2017. He met with Trump, and it went well. Remarkably well, so well, in fact, that Graham gave his new phone number to Trump. By October of 2017, the pair was striking the golf course combined on several. Graham, who previously referred to Trump as a C who wasn't fit for the job, was now singing a different song celebrating their first round of golf, going out as if they were longtime pals. In April 2018, Graham made a public statement stating he would support Trump's campaign for re-election in 2020. Was a startling change for someone who had been among Trump's most shrewd during the 2016 primaries. Detractors, despite the presence of major news networks, had summoned the 2020 presidential Joe Biden's election. Graham remained Trump, and his alliance continued after it. He made an appearance on January 28, 2023, at Trump's 2024's first primetime rally. Moreover, he appeared on Fox News with Sean Hannity, reiterates his backing for, as previously stated, Trump assisted Graham nurture Darlene, his sister, following their parents died within a few months of each other, leaving them without parents. Lost when she was 13 and Graham was 20 to both parents, and being forced to basically becoming his sister's parent was one of the most difficult obstacles he encountered. Despite his intense love for Darlene, it was quite challenging for a 22-year-old to bear such a burden. Accountability for this experience, but brought them as close as they grew, so almost inseparable that when running for president in 2015, Darlene said she wanted to often accompany him on the campaign to demonstrate to voters his more compassionate side. She wished to attend in order to emphasize his character's personal caring aspects that may not always be visible to the public regarding Lindsey Graham's affection. There isn't much to go into in life because of his extreme secrecy, although because things have been somewhat uneventful back. He had a girlfriend in law school named Debbie, but they weren't able to last time as he was in the air. He dated a fellow JAG while in the German military, Carol, a cop who subsequently went on to be employed by Colin Powell, but one significant romance that nearly resulted in a marriage between an heir. Sylvia, a hostess who was assigned to Graham, located a German aviation base and lost a love within a year. The romance terminated due of her advanced age. Mother was unable to move to the south. Graham and Carolina have no intention of remaining in Germany, therefore even with the possibility they parted ways, leaving Graham's. But life hasn't been without. The 2020 dispute got a little heated when an adult film actor who is gay and titled Sean Harding posted a message on Twitter. Shocking charge that he made against Lindsey Graham used the hashtag lady and was gay. He claimed that Graham's nickname was G. Among male prostitutes. This charge ignited social media and rekindled persistent rumors regarding Graham's. There were rumors regarding his private life, observing Graham in homosexual bars and having same-sex partnerships were very ironic given that back in October 2010, he experienced extreme heat for standing up for those who opposed homosexual. Despite all of this, Graham has consistently refuted these accusations in public and made it apparent that he is straight despite the fact that his romantic life has been absent from the scene. As to where the precise address where Graham resides isn't public knowledge in an understandable way, for we do this for security and privacy concerns. You should be aware that he calls Seneca South Carolina home. Seneca is a comfortable little house situated in Oconee County, the state's northwest region, close to the Lake Keogh's Blue Ridge Mountains. Sena's neighborhood reflects the region's nature because it combines both rural and suburban characteristics. It's the type of location where you can take pleasure in a tranquil environment with simple access to the community and nature. Amenities Graham possesses. Noteworthy among the investments are in Seneca South, a 10-ton office building. He bought this property in Carolina 2007 for $2.5 million, but as time went on, the value of the building has increased greatly, and its present worth around $4 million. Another noteworthy property is a 1,254 square foot brick townhouse situated in this village. Was bought by him in Washington, D.C. residence in 1997 for $225,000, similar to his other properties. This house's worth has also greatly valued and is presently valued at about this townhouse, valued at $800,000, serves as Graham's home during his stay in the capital of the country and away from his Seneca home, which is located in a comfortable setting that enables him to reconcile his legislative responsibilities obligations with a cozy living area.